Hello, everyone. Welcome to Writing Quest. My name is Brenden Pugh. Today we have Josh Walker with us again. He is the author of An Exile of Water and Gold. And as of the last time we spoke, it is now released. It's out in the wild now. It's been out for a few months. So how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brendan, for having me. Yeah, going great, man. This is the bad boy himself. So,
Nice.
An Exile of Water and Gold is out now.
I love that cover, man. It's so
Thank
cool.
you. I actually started work with Jeff Brown, the artist, this week on book two, and the draft of that is looking phenomenal. So I can't wait to show it to people. I think it's a level up even from this one, and I love this cover. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So, since the last time we spoke, your book had not come out yet, or it had almost come out, or something like that. So now that you've got a few months of that, I wanted to talk to you a lot about the launch, how that launch went, and then what it went into some of your marketing stuff. So, why don't you tell me about that? What was the launch experience like?
So the launch experience was really good for this book. I had an incredible ARC team. And I think that the key to having a really solid ARC team is trying to get people to understand what the book is about before it comes out, essentially. I think one of the benefits of a front cover like what I've got from Jeff is that really helped to rope ARC readers in initially. And then from there, I basically set up a Discord channel just for ARC readers where they can, speak freely, talk to me if they wanted to. Just encourage kind of, communication between all of us. And so what that yielded was several reviews before release day. And I think that was very powerful in moving copies when it came to launch. So that was probably like the number one thing that I remember from the launch period was that kind of stability in the ARC team. The other thing I think that worked out really well is we planned a pretty extensive book tour. And in the past, I had tried working with book tour companies and I'd had middling experiences. So I'd had some really great experiences and some less than, ideal experiences. And I think that's quite common. But I think what I found through that was that I actually had the wherewithal and I had the networking by the time that Exile came out to be able to organize that book tour myself. And so basically what I did was I packed out basically every other day for about a month until launch, an interview or a written interview or a review or what have you that would kind of drop just to keep people interested in the launch process. And I think looking back on it, I would do that again repeatedly for every major book that I release. Whereas in the next 2 weeks, I've actually got a new novella coming out, and I'm treating that a little bit more lightly because I don't think it needs to have the same kind of spotlight. But if you invest that time and energy in your major book release, I think you'll get good results.
Yeah. I mean, from the outside looking in, it seemed like you really had it organized well, and you reached out to a lot of people, and you got on a lot of things, and so it seemed like it worked really well, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's just about just building rapport with people. Like even with you, like we had that great first chat, and that kind of led into the launch period for me as well. So, being able to just meet people online, connect with them, and talk about books, which is what we all love. Like that's really the key. I think in terms of building that kind of book tour, all you can do is really just try your best. I mean, like there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of content creators. You do sometimes need to kind of barter for attention. That's because there are just so many good books constantly coming out all the time. So, you can't work with everybody, but I think, not having your eggs in one basket is really good. So diversifying the kind of content that's coming out around the book and the people that you're working with is a really cool way just to let people see from the outside looking in that, this book is far reaching. You know what I mean? So, that was one thing that I really tried to do was just make sure I was working with a bunch of different people. Whether they were people who were doing only written work, or people like yourself where we're pre-recording a podcast, and we did a few YouTube live streams and stuff like that too. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool that, I mean, I think we talked about this before, about, how the internet has just allowed people to do so many cool things, like the fact that we can have this conversation, it's just so cool. Um, and I think ultimately, like, as long as what you're doing is genuine, like you kind of talked about the bartering for attention, it's like we're doing that, but at the same time, as long as you're doing that in a genuine way, I think
Yeah, yeah,
it works,
that's right. And I think, yeah, like what I meant by that was like, it's kind of an unfortunate consequence of social media is that you can have exposure to so many people, but trying to get those people to see you is
Mhm.
often a lot tougher than it seems. Um, so for me, like I've already got the connections with people who are involved from a content creation point of view, just because I chat with them, and I've become friends with a lot of people online. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's really helpful. But then after that, it's about thinking about, well, how are we going to get the attention of the potential audience for the book? How are they going to find these posts? How is the algorithm going to service us in the context of everything else that's been pushed around? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about bartering for attention online. It's that how can you actually nail down social media to basically service you rather than you trying to exploit it, for want of a better
Yeah.
word. So and
Yeah.
that's really hard.
I talked about that in the last video I made about the bookstore, was that like getting people's attention is so hard. And I don't think it's because people are necessarily doing it wrong or whatever. Like, I think that there's so many things to
Yeah.
get people's attention
Yeah.
that it's just like, I mean, I do it like if I'm on Facebook or something and I scroll back by all sorts of ads, like I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
looking at, so there's so many things coming at people, um, that like to get just a piece of
Competing for
that
your attention.
attention,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I think it's also like it's hard because like you just said, like I know what that experience is like from a user point of view. So, I'm
Mhm.
dealing with exactly how I respond on social media, which is usually like just going to see exactly what I want to see. And then I'm thinking about, well, how can I actually find my audience? And I think a lot of times people might say things like, oh, well, maybe you don't have an audience yet. Well, that's not really true. I mean, the audience is always there. It's about trying to target that audience. And I think that's really tough because the
Mhm.
people are there. The people are there. There's so many people that if you got your book into their hands, they would read it and think that it was the best thing since sliced bread. So the people are there. There are enough people out there to love everyone's work. It's just that a lot of those people can't find you and you can't find them because of the way that social media promotes, things to certain reaches of audiences or whatever. So, that was probably the thing that I learned was the hardest in the launch process. Um, and I think the book tour in particular helped with that because, like I said, because I was working with such a diverse crew of people, and they were all kind of doing things in their own cool, creative ways, that's what really got the word out.
Mhm.
If I'd have done, maybe 2 or 3 YouTube live streams, like, yeah, it still would have been a fun experience, but the potential people who are joining in on there and, um, have time to kind of listen to what you're saying, very different
Mhm.
to the people who can maybe read a really quick interview on a commute because they follow this person's blog, for example. That's a completely different set of, people that are engaging with that content. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
just worth keeping in mind.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think podcasts are just huge of like, the amount of things that I have looked into, bought, found because of just a podcast, like just hearing someone talk about like something. So I think it's very effective for sure. Cause that's, like I commute for my job. So it's like, I'm always listening to podcasts. I'm listening to something. Um, so I think it's a great way to go about it for sure.
Mm. Oh, absolutely. And like most of us are in that boat these days. you
Mhm.
know, like most of us have time that we need to kill on the way to and from work. And so I think, yeah, like media like podcasts and interviews and stuff are really, really worth doing. But it's also about making sure that you can kind of optimize the kind of content that's coming out around your book too. So if someone is willing to make a short reel or something to help promote your book, then that's really powerful for the people who are not engaging with podcasts, the people who are just kind of scrolling. they might bump into that, and then that's potential engagement for them. Um, so yeah, just being aware of that and being open to kind of, testing the waters with different types of content, I think is really important in a book launch thing. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I think well, the cool thing about book readers too, that I don't know if it's that much different than most other forms like mediums, but with readers are like looking for something new all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
So yeah, they're always looking for something different. Where maybe with like movies and TV, like I don't go see every movie that comes out. I kind of like, yeah, that's not really like what I want to see or whatever. But like with books, I'm way more like, oh, that looks cool. That looks cool. Let's try that. Let's try that. So I do think that does help with books where it like
Absolutely.
the reader is way more like, if I like fantasy books, like I want to read every fantasy book I get my hands on.
And I think also like on that, something which I think is really cool is like when you're finding your audience online, um, keeping in mind that as an author, like I'm also someone that enjoys reading widely too. And so
Mm,
one of the things I really tried to do was have that balance between um, constantly kind of, sharing content about Exile, but at the same time, if I saw a friend or another author that I saw their work from, I was not scared to interrupt my stories, for example, with a repost for them or to shout them out or whatever, because I think the people who are then following me are seeing, yeah, like this guy cares about reading and books and the industry in general. He's not just
mm,
here to pander us with his book. And I think that's important to be really genuine about that stuff because um you could go kind of, too far one way or the other. You could go
mm,
too far this way and say, oh, no, 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 it's my launch period. I'm only posting about my book. I need to give it the best chance possible. But I think that's probably the wrong way to look at it because, especially as a young person, I always thought about the fact that authors were mostly inaccessible people to me.
mm.
So in this day and age, authors aren't. We're kind of changing the landscape a little bit. The fact that you can now go and usually find an interview or something with your favorite author tells us that authors are now thinking about this very differently to how they were thinking about the industry and approaching readers and stuff 10, 20 years ago. Um,
Mm.
and so I think like the more genuine you can be online, the better it's going to pay off for you.
Mm.
At the same time, if you swing too far the other way and then you say, oh, like, yeah, I've got a book coming out, but also I just want to like, continue to just like focus on everyone else's stuff, well, then you're kind of letting your own work through the cracks. So you got to have that balance.
Yeah.
But being unafraid to share and celebrate other people's work, I think is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I don't know where I heard this from, but it was making me thinking of a lot of times like the relationship with the thing happens before the purchase. So
Mm.
it's like if if you want people to get into buying your books and like I don't follow people on social media just for the thing they're selling. I follow them because it's like I want to pay attention to their life. I want to like,
That's
see
right. That's
what's
right.
going
That's
on
right.
there. So it's that combination of the two of like, yeah, you want to get your book out there. Yeah, you want to do that, but also you want to let people know who you are. So it's so they can get to know who you are. You know what I mean? It's kind of that
Yeah, yeah,
combination.
absolutely. And I think also like you can kind of keep in mind some of the more focused kind of acronyms and things that people use in the marketing industry. Like I don't know if you've heard of like the 5 Ps of marketing, so I think it's product, price, placement, I think, or promotion, and also people, like the people that are engaging with the work. So thinking about like these kind of 5 touchstones to your work is also incredibly important, and how you can kind of convey that to your audience in a really engaging and quick way. Visually, this is going to be what you see straight away. And I think I've talked about this in other podcasts, maybe even last time we spoke, but these are my two covers side by side. And the thing about these two covers is I've got an iconographic cover and then I've got this more kind of sprawling landscape artsy cover, and they service completely different things, like not just
Mm,
different audiences, but different marketing purposes, like fundamentally. So for example, with my novella, one of the things I repeatedly hear is people engage with this a lot online because
mm,
oftentimes with this cover, it's so simple, but there's this central kind of orb here that's grabbing your attention. If you crop that down into a tiny thumbnail, you still get to preserve the impact of the cover. And with a cover like this, I don't think that it's as impactful on a thumbnail level. Having
Mm,
said that, when you're using it in marketing, in graphics, when it's circulating through social media, it has a huge statement. So it services two different purposes. So it means what I've got is I've got two products, they're related to one another, they'll feed into one another, and the way that the product's presenting visually to the customer, to the reader, are slightly different for different reasons. Um, and I guess like the other kind of logic behind cover art for me as well is that I've grown up in Australia my whole life, and so a lot of the books that are published here are published in the UK market. Um,
mm,
and yourself, like, if you compare general, now that you're on a bookstore, if you compare UK covers to US covers, oftentimes the market difference is that the UK covers are very iconographic and very kind of simplified or minimalistic, and the
mm,
US covers tend to be much more design heavy, usually more artistic, etc. And so I also wanted to be able to have a place where readers could come to this one series and have a buy-in opportunity with both types of marketing that they'd be used to in the place
yeah,
where they live, in the bookstores that they visit. So that was
yeah,
kind of the other, yeah,
yeah. That's smart. I like that. Well, and I've even kind of experimented a lot with this in the store, even um, where, like, so right now I've got all the books of the people that I've interviewed on the table laid
yeah,
out flat. So when you walk by, you can see all the covers. And I had them up on a shelf, and they weren't really moving. And now that I put them out on the table, they're moving more because people are like, you can't, something just draws their eye and they pick it up and. So yeah, I think that's really smart to think through that stuff of even like I was thinking when you talked about the icon, then when you shrink it down, you can still see it. That's like a YouTube thing too. Like people are saying that on
yeah,
YouTube. Like if you're going to make a thumbnail, make sure if it shrinks down, people can still see it.
yeah.
Which I don't know if I do that well or not, but I
You
think,
got great thumbnails.
well, it's,
Yeah,
it's all you guys. So yeah, but I think it just, I've experimented a lot with that of like where things are in the store. Are they on a shelf? Are they on a table? Um, are they in the front of the store, in the back of the store? Like all that stuff really matters for when people are looking. And
yeah.
I
And
think
so what?
I think that translates to social media too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. You're talking about placement, which is another one of those 5 Ps that I mentioned, and you're talking about it in the context of a brick and mortar store, and it's really no different when you bring it online. Like a lot of people, I think, get quite kind of flustered by how to approach the digital market, whether it's for books or other media, it doesn't matter. But I think the thing to remember is you've got to treat it like a brick and mortar store. So if you move something around, if you adjust something slightly, that might have an impact the next day, and so that's what you would be doing in store constantly is practicing these things. Where does this stuff stand out? Where can I get more eyes on these products here? How do I move this stock? Whatever. They're all
Mhm.
decisions that you've got to make on a digital level too. So thinking about how the book presents on Amazon or like, do you have your A plus content, which is kind of like the graphics and banners that you can add to your book, page? Do you have that sorted out? That was all the stuff that I was doing in the weeks leading up to Exile. So
Mhm.
just trying to make sure that every kind of potential touch point where a reader might engage with my work, that there is a really easy way for them to kind of um, get invested or just be interested in it. So, and then the other thing I think to think about when you're talking book launches, and this is a hot topic, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, but is price. So that's one of your other big uh, one of the 5 Ps that I talked about. And I think with price, it's really hard to know what's going to work. Excuse me. So with Exile, it launched at 99 cents. And a lot of people um, do not agree with me that that was the right move. A lot of people would say that um, you're undervaluing the work. And so people will look at that price and then assume it can't be of high quality because it's that cheap. I tend to disagree with that. I tend to think that the book has done well in its starting months because of that price point, it was allowing more people to encounter it, basically.
Mhm.
But there's a risk to kind of both mindsets, and I think you really
Mhm.
got to play that quite carefully. So at this point now, we're in January, so it's been 4 months since launch, and so at this point now I'm starting to think about approaching price differently. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, maybe it's time to lift the price slightly and start trying to alter the way that the algorithm is engaging with the book, um, compared to when it first came out, and there was a lot of kind of organic hype about it. So you've got to think about all these things, and there are several approaches, but that was mine, was to run it at the most accessible cost possible, and hopefully that would maximize um, buy-in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would, I think honestly, once you get like, I think if you put it at like 99 cents, like that probably motivates some people who maybe they saw the cover and they were like, yeah, but then they it's like, well, it's only 99 cents. So,
Like,
like it might motivate those people that were not originally motivated by seeing it, Um, but I think I'm not, maybe this is different online or in store. Like if I want something, I buy it. You know what I mean? Like if
yeah,
I want
yeah,
the book,
yeah,
you know, if I want a book and the book is, it could be $20 or $40, but like if I really want it,
you're gonna
I'm
buy it
gonna get it.
regardless. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And what I've noticed, at least in the store, is just that. Like if people want the thing, they don't worry too much. And especially like nowadays, like everything is so expensive anyways. I really think people just like if they're gonna spend the money, they're gonna spend the money.
They've already
So
mentally committed before they get there. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's
So
right. That's right.
now where that plays into like for instance, great example. So like this is where like I think it's kind of on a spectrum. Brandon Sanderson, people are buying his book. Like they don't care if it's,
That's right.
$70 or whatever. But like in the case of an indie author, that is a good question of like, does that 99 cents really push people? Do I bump it up? Like, yeah. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do think for the most part, if people see something and they're like, I want that, they don't, unless it's
That's
outrageous,
right.
they don't really think too much about it.
I think the I guess the thing I'm settled on with this is that in the context of the launch itself, I think the 99 cents was really helpful to be able to say,
Mhm.
like the book's out. Um, Everyone's naturally excited for the book to come out. There was a decent amount of hype beforehand. Um, and so, the book's out and it's only 99 cents. But then I think now that we've kind of come out of that kind of, that hype train moment, now I'm really starting to think about it more from the angle that you're coming at, where we say, well, what's the book worth? If the reader's interested in the book, they're going to buy it anyway. And then they'll
Mhm.
actually feel like they've gotten, value from it as well. So there's kind of two perceived aspects of what value means, both for the reader and for the person who's created the product, which is me, right? So that's another thing to think about. Um, but yeah, and then I think the other thing to consider around your book launch time is one of the other P, which is promotion. So like promotion is, yeah, like it's graphics online, it's doing social media, it's engaging with your audience through whatever means you can, but it's also, I'm talking as well like actual formal promotions that you can do online. So thinking about, can you invest a small amount of money into an ebook
Mhm.
promotion service or something like that? Um, I did one. It was pretty good. In fact, it yielded pretty decent results. Um, I'd probably be inclined to do it again. At the same time, I think that um, you can kind of naturally steer people towards your work nearly with just a little bit more effort than something like one of those paid services. So it depends.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, I know a lot of people will talk about things like BookBub, which is obviously like one of the bigger promotional services that are available to indies. But something like BookBub, for example, it's an exclusive thing. So they'll pick you. You've got to submit an application, and if you get picked, then you pay quite a high fee, but you're guaranteed a decent return. but the chance of being picked is slim. And, you need to meet certain criteria. So you need to have 50 reviews minimum, um, this number of sales minimum, blah, blah, blah. So that's, one kind of formally paid promotional service that you could try using. But again, you're not going to be able to do that at launch time.
Yeah.
What I was doing instead, I was doing was thinking of ways that I could promote product through my own means. So, for example, I did a launch edition that was signed and numbered, and I did that through my web store, and I limited it to 20 copies. And 20 copies is not much. In fact, the 20 copies sold a lot faster than I anticipated, and that was a good thing. But also at the same time, what that's meant now is that continuing through with the series, if I do 20 and my audience grows, well, it's going to be very hard to get a numbered piece. So,
Yeah.
and that can build hype because you now have an exclusive product here, that you might have a chance to buy in on at some stage. But at the same time, it can detriment you as well. So thinking about that stuff really carefully, I think if I could have my time again, I possibly would have made it a slightly longer run, maybe 30, maybe a little bit more, just because of how fast it's sold through. But different authors have different levels of exposure and different audience sizes. And so you need to think about it in the context of your book and what you're trying to launch. But I would recommend doing something like that. That was really helpful, and it steered a lot of people to my mailing list. And honestly, like organically growing your mailing list is really important as an indie author because it gives you a local contact point with people that really care about your work. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, like you got to grow a following of some kind, whether that's social media, an email list. I do agree with you. I think an email list is very important because you have a direct contact. Because the thing that sucks with the whole thing is that with social media, you don't know what that algorithm is going to do. Like I post something and then like half the people that follow don't see it, so, and that's just because the algorithm was like, yeah, we're gonna do this. So, that it's just, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's like, you got to grow your following somehow, whether that's email, social media, YouTube, whatever it is. Because those are the people that are really
Hey,
interested,
yeah,
they're there for you. So they're interested in what you're doing.
yeah. I think and look, I don't want to pander on about algorithm for ages, but I think another important thing to add on to what you're saying is around the time just after launch, what you'll find often with book launches is your launch trajectory will be really steeply um elevated, and then it will slowly drop off. It doesn't tend to do this. It tends to kind of spike on release and then slowly peter off. And so that gives you time to one, recover, and also to also think about strategies that you can use to start lifting that back up over time. So the reason I say this is because obviously the US election happened in November. And so what I saw at that time was, well, my book was still doing really well in terms of digital sales, but social media, like the landscape of social media changed drastically as a bit of a consequence from the election. So especially like X, for example, became a wasteland essentially overnight. And so that's changed a lot for me because a big part of my audience was on X. I developed a lot of my starting out was all on that platform. And that platform had really helped me garner an audience. And so I found that I couldn't really post there in the same way and get the same level of engagement. It's still like that now, so I don't spend as much time on there. I've kind of become more reliant on Instagram, which is something I thought would never happen because I hate creating, video and photo content just because it takes a lot of time and I want to write, So you got to play the game, I guess is the point of what I'm saying. Like these things are really volatile and they change a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
not having your
I
eggs
like
in
that
one basket. Yeah.
point of what you're saying about like the election and stuff of that. It's like it consumes more of the space on the platform. And so all the other stuff doesn't, but like it's not just the election. Like anytime anything happens in the world, it can, like if like a Marvel movie is coming out, that's all anyone's ever posted about. It's this Marvel movie. So that's an interesting thought for sure to think about. There is only so much space, on those
Yeah.
platforms. So it can only show you so many posts at a time.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously there was a bit of like an exodus from that platform at that time too. And I think that impacted people's abilities to retain follow accounts and things like that. And I don't put too much stock into that, but sometimes I think like it's worth just acknowledging that if a bunch of people leave the platform, if there were people that really engage with your work, that can be hard sometimes because you don't have a specific way that you can find them again. Um, so being able to manage it's hard, but being able to manage multiple social medias, I think, is important. As much as it's a time suck. Um, and I think it's also really important at the same time to acknowledge when you're burnt out, just back off and recoup because yeah, social media can be exhausting. Like I'll be the first to say that I don't like using it on a personal level, especially, but for this kind of stuff, it is important. And I think it's just about being able to juggle it, so to speak. So
Yeah. Well, and you're in a natural, like I put all most of my work into YouTube because that's kind of the main place that I'm working on growing. But then I have the other ones, and that's where I've interacted with a lot of people on. So I don't always post a lot of stuff, but I'll interact with you guys or, whatever's going on. Um, and it's just growing a little bit because of that, but I'm not really always putting that, so it kind of depends on like what you're wanting to do
that's right.
and
That's right.
what the goal is.
Yeah, like you'll see certain authors who will, they'll copy and paste their posts across like 6 different platforms. And I think if you've got the ability to do that, like by all means, go for it. At the same time, every platform's algorithm reacts differently. So I don't know if it necessarily is a net positive to do that. And also it's time again. So, and I think at the end of the day, this was my first book, my first main novel that was released. Um, I personally don't think that, uh, by the time 3 comes out, and I've got a backlog of 6 books at that point, so 3 novellas, 3 novels. When that happens, I don't think I need to engage hopefully, with social media as much as I have in the past because the back catalog itself is an organic way of growing your audience as well. So it's important to acknowledge that you need to make sure you keep writing. It's very easy to slip into this pattern, this habit of, the book's out, let's talk about the book, blah, blah, blah. But like, you got to get back in you got to get your bum in the seat, at some point because that's what we're here to do. We're here to tell the story. You can't forget that. So, that's another thing that I've been kind of, learning as time gone on too.
Yeah. So we can get into a little bit of writing. So we've been talking about the social media stuff. Let's get into a little bit of writing. So you got this first book out going into, so you've got a novella, but you're probably working through your second book now, I'm guessing. So how has the experience from the first one from beginning to end, how is that shaping how you're approaching this new draft for the second book? Has it changed anything or not at all?
Yeah, the process has become more comprehensive and I'm much more confident in what I'm doing, generally speaking. So, I think it's important to remember that this is a slow race. Um, and when I reflect on it, it took me about a year to write Exile, just under a year. It was about 9 months. And then it took me about another year to edit and prepare for publication. And now that book 1's out, we say all the time, book 1, you can take as long as you want. So make sure you do it right, because you don't get a chance to relive that. Now that that's out, to, like you do naturally feel the pressure. Like,
Right.
I've got to have book 2 out this year. So if I want to maintain the trajectory that I'm happy with, I've got to have book 2 out this year. And so what that means is now I'm writing at a faster pace, but I've got the confidence to do that. So I didn't have the confidence to do that until I'd seen a book through the entire process.
Mhm.
And also I think I had the benefit of publishing my novella first as well at the start of 2024. And I think that really helped because that's another example where I could see it through the process, but it was a lot briefer of a process, a lot less pressure. So, and the same thing's happening now. I've got a novella coming out in 2 weeks, and again, the pressure's off for that one. It's just a bit of fun. I want readers to enjoy it. I want to enjoy the process of it. So,
Mhm.
but where I concentrate a lot of the effort is in the main books in the series. And so what I've noticed with the writing of book two is, there's several things happening on a macro level. I'm more confident and I kind of know what I'm doing. On a micro level, I'm more finicky, which sounds like
Right.
it sounds like a bit of a, what's it called? Like a, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like a, contradiction. Like it sounds like a contradiction. Um, because, I'll sit down and I'll be working on book two and I'll have these like micro, panics, where I'll be like, oh, maybe that's not the right direction to take this character. Because when you're in book two, if you think about it, like in terms of a 3-act story structure, book two is part of a normal story where you've got middle story syndrome. So,
Mhm.
so book two is the point where it's make or break. You can bore everyone to death, or you could overdo the pacing and the plot and not really deliver the impact properly. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. So on a
Yeah.
micro level, I'm very kind of aware of that. And I'm constantly going back to the outline and thinking as far ahead as I can, is this outline putting my characters in the right place or blah, blah, blah. How many different ways can I approach this situation, for example?
Yeah.
Um, and but then, on a macro level, I'm comfortable with the process. I'm comfortable with outputting more words, day by day than I was, 2 years ago. So, so that stuff's easier. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's kind of like it's like, you did it one time.
that's right. Yeah,
So,
yeah,
it's like, okay, we can do this again. We've already completed it. But yeah, I like what you said about, being able to take your time with the first one. And that really resonates with me because I haven't published my stuff yet. And part of the reason is like, I really want it to be right, you know?
mm,
And
mm,
so, but I agree with you. It's like once you get that first one out, then the pressure happens. It's
yes,
like I have no pressure right now, so I can take the time to do what I want to do. Um, but at the same time, then like you can fall in the trap of where I've been in this too, where it's like you're never putting it out, and
yeah,
so you know, so that's I'm
yeah,
kind of in that moment with myself right now of like, what's my timeline here of when I'm going to get that first thing out?
yeah. I mean, I think the biggest piece of advice would be just take the time and also take whatever opportunities you've got to study other people's launch processes. So, like it's good that we can talk about this. I'm really happy to share what I learned from my launch, but just to get other authors ideas about launch processes too, because there's so many ways to approach it. Like for
Mhm.
example, with Exile, I wrote it in 2023, and then 2024 was the year that I just spent getting it ready for publication. And when I wrote it, like when I finished the draft and I felt confident enough that this was the book that was going to be published, finally, after 4 novels. When I did that, I actually did forward plan. Like I wrote a plan, put it on my wall right next to my desk, and it basically showed me step by step what I was doing until the middle of 2024 when I anticipated that it was to be released. So what I'm trying to say is I gave myself 2 years Exile intentionally, knowing that that is much longer than I would get for any other book, basically. Um, because I wanted to make sure that I took every moment I needed to get it right. And I think for the most part, everything was pretty smooth sailing. Like the one part of the pre-publication process that went wrong for me, which I'm pretty public about, is that I did not anticipate um, my editing time properly, and so I had to move my release date from June to September. But that 3-month change, even though it was a disappointment at the time, it's nothing in hindsight. And I
Yeah.
now know how to circumvent that issue in the future. So like yeah, giving yourself as much time as possible with book one is very important. Very, very important. Because also I think it gives you an opportunity to figure out just how much you can do. So I gave
Mhm.
myself 2 years, but at the same time, in that 2 year span, I told myself, let's just try to draft the whole thing as efficiently as possible. And once I knew that I could draft the book in 8 or 9 months, that told me, well, I'm not as slow a writer as I thought. It's just that I needed to set that goalpost. So
Sure.
yeah,
I like what you said there too about you kind of said something pretty quick, but I think it's important where you wrote the book and you were like, okay, this is going to be published. This is it. But then you took the time to go over the marketing plan. And I think I do this with YouTube videos where it's like I finish the YouTube video and I want to put it out like that day. And it's like, hold on, like give yourself so I think that's a really important, like when you finish the book, your first thing is like, I want to get it out there. But it's like, no, take the time, write out the plan. What are you going to do? Set it all up, create the artwork. Like it's like you finish this process and now do this process before you just throw it out into the world. Yeah.
and I think it's a good lesson for me because I'm an impatient person by nature, so I really had to train myself to be okay with holding back, um, and it's constant challenge. Like
Mhm.
um, drafting my cover up with Jeff Brown this week, I looked at the draft and I was like, oh wow, I've got to tell this person, this person. No, no, no. Just like teach yourself to just hold back.
Mhm.
Everyone's gonna see it eventually, and
Right.
and don't sacrifice potential explosion of interest that you can get from something just because you're really excited about it.
Yeah.
Like yeah. So that's hard. That's really
Mhm.
hard because you're investing time in the book. You're proud of what you're creating, and so you want to kind of share that effervescent energy that you've got around it, but at the same time you've got to do it at the time that suits the audience more than when it suits you.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing worse than, I mean, you can say this about anything, whether it's a creative project or a marketing plan or your job or whatever. There's nothing worse than like constantly having to rush everything. So it's like if you finish it up and then you take the time to actually develop your marketing plan and build it all out, then you can enjoy the process of it unfolding as opposed to I got to keep ahead of it, as it's
Yeah,
barreling
yeah.
down the track.
You don't want it to feel like that. You don't want it to feel like a boulder going down a mountain and you're running away. The second it gets to that level, I think it's too much. But
Yeah.
you can compartmentalize. So another thing on writing that I've done, that I've been able to teach myself is juggling multiple things. And because I'm writing in one world, and I would recommend this for any new author, if you're planning a series, I think just write your series. I know there's a lot of other people who would say, from a marketing point of view, write to sell. And so if that means, okay, there's a lot of cozy happening right now, let's put out a cozy book, then go back to the series for the next one. I would recommend not doing that, both from an artistic merit point of view, but also from a point of view of pressure, because at the moment I'm working on one series. I'm aware of the continuity. I'm aware of the lore. It's all there. It's all front of mind. I'm constantly thinking about it. I'm constantly writing notes on it. And so what that allowed me to do was during the final edit and pre-publication process for Exile, I drafted the next novella. Like I was literally able to write that whole book while I was doing everything else, and it didn't really take away from Exile. It didn't hurt it at all,
Mhm.
because both those books need to work in tandem anyway. And so all I was doing was helping myself. And then um, when Exile finally came out, the week that it came out, I finished that novella, and then maybe stupidly, I sat down and wrote the next novella straight away because I was like,
Right.
you know what? It's
Yeah.
front of mind. Like I've been revising Exile so much. I've read through it so many times. I've now written this novella. I've got all the continuity for 50 years of lore. Like, let's just
Mhm.
get it, just keep it moving. Don't sacrifice that. That is the good boulder. That's the boulder you want to roll down the hill, but
Yeah.
you don't want to be putting out, things in multiple series and then not being able to do any of them justice. Because every time you take a step back, you need to reset your mind for this story, which has a completely different configuration, completely different subgenre, whatever it is, right? So yeah, that's another thing to keep in
Yeah,
mind.
I've done a lot of that with because my series I'm playing is fairly long. And one of the ways that I like if I get stuck with what and that's part of the reason which I've struggled to get this first one right is because I have a lot of things I want to make sure get in there, you know. But one of the things that like if I get stuck or if I need to work out a character or something is I've actually jumped to a different book in the series and just like wrote a scene
Yeah.
of like, okay, this needs. So it's kind of like so I have a scene or a bunch of scenes for all these other books that I'm probably not going to get to forever. But it's like I see it like what you just said, where like I'm adding to the whole thing, so it's still
It's a net
you
positive.
know it's a
Yeah.
net positive.
You're only helping
Yeah,
yourself. And like when I drafted the new novella, that was fun.
right.
Like for the most part, it was really fun and easy to write because the novella is an excuse for me to have a bit more fun with the world. Firstly, that's kind of what the novella's service to me as a writer and to the readers. And also, it's inherently tied with the book that was coming out at the time. And so, it's a win-win. It's a win-win. And what that means is now we're going to be not even 6 months down the road, and I'll have that out. And it just keeps the content coming out, but without sacrificing or burning me out.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's really important. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, hey, we're getting close to an hour. You've got a place to be, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But so I always end kind of with what's your kind of three big things you tell people. Um, so what would you say in the context of releasing this book and going into your next one? What are kind of the three big takeaways you've had from that?
Yeah. Time manage. That's a big one. Like really like scrutinize your time management. Really scrutinize time management. Like try to finesse it as much as possible. Come up with a day by day plan. That's what I did. Literally had a day by day plan. I know that won't work for everybody. But even if it's week by week or something, just small goalposts that you can hit in order to meet certain criteria, whether that's your launch, whether that's the completion of another book, whatever. So time manage. The second thing is think about those 5 Ps of marketing. So think about your product, your placement, your price, people who are engaging with it, and how you're going to promote it. That's really key. That stuff's really key. And arguably write down a plan for that as well. And then the third thing is like don't forget to take a breath and just enjoy the ride for the most part because it is pretty exhilarating to get it out there. And I think that initial launch period, you can very quickly turn it into a bunch of chores rather than enjoying the fact that the book's out in the world. So if you do all that pre-planning and if you're really scrutinizing your time management early on, you can just savor the moment, which is important.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you finished a book and you put it out like that's, it's a big thing. So I
It's a big
think
deal. Yeah,
yeah, it's a big deal and it's important to celebrate that stuff and, give yourself a pat on the back.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, why don't you tell us where we can find you, all that kind of stuff, what's coming up next, all that.
Mm-hmm. So my website is joshuawalkerauthor.com. You can sign up to my mailing list and get a free copy of my novella, The Rest of the Gods, over there. On social media, I'm Joshua Walker AU at all platforms, which is nice. Never used to be like that, but it is now. And yeah, so following book 1, Exile of Water and Gold, I've got a new novella, The Child of the Greenwood, coming out in 2 weeks. It's considered another entry point for the series, so new readers can start there if they wish. And in October, I've got book 2, An Empire of Dirt and Lies, coming out. So look forward to that one too.
Nice. All right. Awesome. Well, it's great talking to you, and we'll put all that stuff down below so everyone can check it out. So thanks so much for watching, everyone, and we will see you next time on Writing Quest.
Thank you.